Welcome back to Tina Romance Library, where powerful alphas fall hard, and the women they underestimate change everything. Every story here is complete, immersive, and emotion-driven. No cliffhangers, no rushed endings, just full romances you can sink into. So if you love possessive alphas, strong heroines who don't beg, slow burn tension, emotional payoffs, and stories that actually finish, you're in the right place. I need you to join the pack right now by subscribing. Leave a like if you enjoy immersive romance, and settle in because once the story begins, we don't stop until the ending. Now, let's get into it. I should have known something was wrong when my own mother smiled. Not the kind of smile you give someone you love. Not even the kind you give a stranger. No, this was the smile of a woman who'd been waiting years for the perfect moment to break you. And today, in front of the entire village, she'd finally found it. I was on my knees in the center of the square. Dirt pressed into my skin, gritty and cold, the kind that stains more than just your clothes. The sun beat down on the back of my neck, but I didn't feel warm. I felt exposed, naked, even though I was fully dressed, because everyone was watching. Everyone. Old women with their market baskets, young mothers pulling their children close like my shame might be contagious, men who'd known me since I was small, now looking at me like I was something pitiful, something broken. My mother stood above me, and God, she was enjoying this. "A poor man," she said, her voice carrying across the square like she wanted to make sure even the people in the back could hear. My daughter chose to marry a poor man. A nobody with nothing to his name. The whispers started then, a low hum that made my skin crawl. I could feel their judgment like hands pressing against my chest, pushing me further into the dirt. Look at her. What was she thinking? Threw her whole life away. For what? For him. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to tell them they didn't know anything. That Darren was kind when no one else had been. That he actually saw me. When my own family looked right through me unless they needed something. But I didn't say a word, because if I opened my mouth, I was afraid I'd beg, and I would not beg. Not to her, not to any of them. So I kept my head down, kept my hands clenched in my lap, kept breathing even though it felt like the air had turned to stone in my lungs. My mother circled me slowly, deliberately, like a predator. You could have had comfort, respectability, a real future, but you threw it all away for a man who can't even provide for you. What kind of life is that? What kind of daughter does that make you? The kind who wanted to be loved instead of sold, I thought bitterly, but I didn't say it. The crowd murmured their agreement. Of course they did. They always agreed with her. She was wealthy, connected, powerful in the way that small-town people measure power by how much control you have over everyone else's lives. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I blinked them back. I would not cry. Not here. Not for her. Then I felt it. A shift in the air. A change in the energy around me. Like the moment before lightning strikes, when everything goes quiet and still, and your skin prickles with anticipation. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. Coming toward me through the crowd. My body knew before my mind did. My pulse kicked up. My breath caught. Something deep in my chest pulled tight, like a string being tugged by invisible hands. Darren. I didn't have to look up to know it was him. I could feel him. The way you feel a storm coming. The way you feel eyes on you in the dark. The crowd parted. I heard the whispers change curiosity now, instead of mockery. And then he was there, standing in front of me, blocking out the sun. I lifted my head. He looked down at me with those dark, unreadable eyes. Eyes that had always made me feel like he could see straight through to the parts of myself I kept hidden. His jaw was set, his expression calm, but there was something simmering underneath. Something dangerous and controlled, like a wolf pretending to be tame. He extended his hand. Not a question, not a request. Just there, waiting. "Get up," he said quietly. His voice was low, rough around the edges, but steady. So steady. You don't kneel for anyone." My hand shook as I reached for him. The second our fingers touched, I felt it, that grounding presence, that bone-deep certainty that as long as he was standing there, nothing could hurt me. Not really. His thumb brushed across my knuckles, just once, so small, so deliberate, and God help me, my heart steadied. The panic that had been clawing at my chest eased, because he was here. He pulled me to my feet effortlessly, and I stood beside him, still holding his hand like it was the only thing tethering me to the ground. My mother's smile faltered, just for a second, but I saw it. "Darren," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "How noble of you to come to her defense. But this is a family matter. It doesn't concern you. She's my wife." His voice didn't rise, didn't waver, but somehow everyone went silent. "It concerns me." The way he said wife, like it was fact, like it was law, like there was no universe in which I wasn't his and he wasn't mine. Heat bloomed in my chest, unfurling like something waking up after a long sleep. Why does this man, this poor, simple man, make me feel safer than my own blood ever did? My mother's expression hardened. "You've made your choice then. Fine, but understand this. If you leave with him, you leave with nothing. No dowry, no inheritance, no family. You'll be nothing but a poor man's wife." She said it like a curse, like the worst fate imaginable. Darren didn't even hesitate. "She won't be coming back." 3 words. That's all it took. 3 words, and I knew bone deep, soul certain that I'd made the right choice. Because this man, this poor man, had just claimed me in front of everyone, had stood between me and my mother's cruelty without flinching, had called me his like it was the most important truth in the world, and as he turned to lead me away, his hand still wrapped firmly around mine, I realized something. I didn't care about the money, didn't care about the inheritance or the big house or any of it, because for the first time in my life I wasn't alone, and that was worth everything. We walked in silence through the village streets, past the staring eyes and the whispered judgments. Darren's hand never loosened around mine. If anything, his grip tightened not painfully, but possessively, like he was afraid if he let go, I might disappear. I kept my eyes forward, didn't look at the faces I'd known my whole life, didn't acknowledge the pity or the scorn or whatever else they were throwing at me, because none of it mattered anymore. My mother's voice carried after us, shrill and sharp. "You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back, and I won't be here." Darren's jaw tightened, but he didn't turn around, didn't dignify her with a response. We kept walking, and with every step away from that square, I felt lighter, like chains I hadn't even known I was wearing were falling away, link by link. By the time we reached the edge of the village, my hand had stopped shaking. "Are you all right?" His voice was quiet. "Careful." I looked up at him. This man I'd married barely 2 months ago, and realized I didn't actually know the answer to that question. Was I all right? I'd just been publicly humiliated by my own mother, disowned, cast out with nothing but the clothes on my back and the hand of a man everyone said was beneath me. But when I looked into his eyes, those dark, steady eyes that never wavered, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I will be." The corner of his mouth lifted, just barely. "You will be." It wasn't a question, it was a promise. And God help me, I believed him. It started 3 months earlier, before the wedding, before any of this. I was carrying water from the well-too-heavy buckets that made my shoulders scream and my hands blister. It was the 3rd trip that day, and I still had 1 more to go before I'd have enough for washing and cooking and everything else my mother needed done before sundown. I was so focused on not spilling, on keeping my breathing even, on ignoring the burning in my palms, that I didn't hear him approach. "Let me help." I nearly dropped both buckets. He was standing there, this stranger, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe, or curiosity. His clothes were worn but clean. His hands looked like they'd seen hard work, and his eyes, His eyes made my breath catch. "I don't need help," I said automatically. "Because that's what you said. That's what women in my position always said. I'm fine. I can handle it. I don't need anything from anyone." He tilted his head slightly, like he was studying me. "I didn't ask if you needed it," I offered. There was something about the way he said it. Calm. Matter of fact. No pity. No judgment. Just an offer. My arms were shaking. My hands were bleeding through the rough rope handles. And this man, this complete stranger, was looking at me like I was worth helping. "Why?" I asked. Because I genuinely didn't understand. Nobody helped for free. There was always a price. "Because you're struggling," he said simply. "And I can carry them." I should have said no. Should have been smart about it. Careful. But I was so tired, so worn down. And something in his voice made me want to trust him. So I let him take the buckets. He lifted them like they weighed nothing. Didn't grunt or strain or make a show of it. Just picked them up and started walking toward my house like he'd done it 1,000 times before. "I'm Darren," he said over his shoulder. "I know," I replied, because I'd heard about him. The handyman. The drifter who'd shown up a few weeks ago looking for work. The man with no family and no money and nothing to his name but his skills and his word. The poor man. "And you're the merchant's daughter," he said. I winced. "That's what they call me." He glanced back at me, and there was something in his expression, something knowing. "What do you call yourself?" Nobody had ever asked me that before. I told him my name, my real name, not the merchant's daughter or that girl, or any of the other ways people referred to me, just me. He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made warmth spread through my chest, slow and unexpected. "Nice to meet you," he said. And somehow, I believed him. He came back the next day. Not for the water, for the roof. I didn't ask him to fix it. Didn't even mention that it leaked when it rained. But somehow, he knew. Or maybe he just noticed. The way he seemed to notice everything. I found him on the ladder, tools spread around him, working in the afternoon heat like it was nothing. "What are you doing?" I called up. "Fixing your roof." "I didn't ask you to do that." "I know." I crossed my arms, trying to look stern even though something in my chest was doing that fluttering thing again. "I can't pay you." He paused, hammer in hand, and looked down at me. "Did I ask for payment?" "No, but..." "Then stop worrying about it." I didn't know what to do with that. With him. With this strange man who helped for no reason and asked for nothing in return. "You fix things like you're running from winter itself," I said, watching him work. He laughed. Actually laughed. It was a low, rumbling sound that made something warm curl in my stomach. "Maybe I am," he said, but there was something in his eyes when he looked at me. Something that made me think he wasn't talking about winter at all. After that, he was everywhere. Not in an intrusive way, not hovering or demanding attention, but present. He fixed the baker's oven, repaired the cobbler's door, built a new fence for the widow down the lane, and every job somehow brought him closer to me. He'd pass by while I was working in the garden, stop to help me lift something heavy, hand me tools when I was trying to fix something myself badly. His fingers would brush mine when he passed me a hammer. He'd reach past me to grab a board, and I'd smell cedar and wood smoke and something underneath that was just him. Once, I had dirt on my cheek from weeding. I didn't realize it until he reached out slowly, carefully, giving me time to pull away and brushed it off with his thumb. The touch lasted maybe 2 seconds. It burned into my skin like a brand. "There," he murmured, his voice low. "Better." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only stand there like an idiot while he smiled at me and went back to work. And that's when I started to realize. This wasn't just kindness. This was something else entirely. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was reading into things that weren't there, because men like Darren didn't look at women like me. Not really. Not the way I was starting to think he was looking at me. But then the miller's daughter laughed at one of his jokes. Laughed too loud, too long, touching his arm like she had a right to. And Darren's eyes flicked immediately to me. Not to see if I'd noticed, not to gauge my reaction, but like he needed to make sure I was still there. Like my presence was the only thing that mattered. The miller's daughter kept talking, but he wasn't listening anymore. He was looking at me with an intensity that made my knees weak. He looks at me like I'm the only woman alive. The thought struck me so suddenly, so completely, that I had to turn away before he saw what it did to me. It was twilight when he found me on the porch. I'd been sitting there for an hour, watching the sun sink below the hills, trying to make sense of the tangled mess in my chest. He climbed the steps slowly, sat beside me without asking, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him, but not touching. "You're quiet tonight," he said. "I'm always quiet. Not like this." I picked at the hem of my dress, not looking at him. "I was just thinking." "About?" "Love," I said before I could stop myself, then immediately wanted to take it back. Because who says that? Who just blurts out something like that? But Darren didn't laugh, didn't make a joke. He just waited. So I kept talking. "I don't think I believe in it anymore," I admitted quietly. "Real love, I mean. The kind where someone actually sees you. Not what you can do for them or what you're worth or how you make them look. Just you." I felt him go still beside me. "I think that's a story," I continued. "Something people tell themselves to make the loneliness easier." Silence stretched between us, heavy, thick. Then he spoke, and his voice was rougher than I'd ever heard it. "What if someone already sees you?" My heart stopped. I turned to look at him, and the expression on his face, it hurt, like my words had cut something deep inside him. "What?" I whispered. He reached for my hand. Slowly, deliberately, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. His fingers closed around mine, warm and calloused and steady, and I felt that same grounding presence, that same certainty. "What if someone has been seeing you since the first moment they met you?" he said quietly. "What if they see how strong you are, even when you're breaking? How kind you are, even when no one's kind to you? What if they see you just you, and that's all they've ever wanted?" I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at him while my entire world tilted on its axis. "Darren, you don't have to say anything," he cut me off gently. "I just needed you to know. You're not invisible, not to me." The air between us felt electric, charged, like one wrong move and everything would ignite. I should have kissed him, should have closed that tiny distance and pressed my mouth to his and let whatever this was consume us both. But I was terrified, so I pulled my hand away, stood up, put distance between us even though it felt like tearing something vital out of my chest. "I should go inside," I said, hating how my voice shook. He didn't try to stop me, didn't protest, just nodded once, his jaw tight, his eyes dark with something that looked like longing and restraint and hunger all mixed together. And somehow, that restraint, that control made it so much worse, because I wanted him to stop me. God help me, I wanted him to stop me, but he didn't. He just let me go. And as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, all I could think about was his voice. What if someone already sees you? The gossip started 2 days after the porch conversation. I heard it at the market first. Whispers that cut off when I walked past. Eyes that followed me like I was something scandalous, something improper. "She's been spending time with him." Alone. You know what that means. Poor girl doesn't know any better. I kept my head high and my face blank, but inside, I was screaming. Because they didn't know anything. Didn't know that Darren had been nothing but respectful. That he'd pulled away when I wasn't ready. That he'd given me space when every instinct probably told him to push. But none of that mattered to them. By the 3rd day, my mother showed up. She didn't knock, just barged into the house like she owned it, her face tight with fury and something else. Something that looked almost like fear. "Have you lost your mind?" she hissed. I was kneading bread. Didn't stop. Didn't look at her. "Good morning to you too. Don't be flippant with me. The entire village is talking about you and that worker." My hands stilled in the dough. "His name is Darren." "I don't care what his name is. You will stop seeing him immediately." "No." The word came out calm, final, and it seemed to stun her into silence. "Excuse me?" I turned to face her, flour dusting my hands, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small under her gaze. I said no, I won't stop seeing him. Her face went red. "Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? Your reputation, your prospects, your entire future." "My future was never mine," I interrupted. "It was always yours. Something you could trade or sell or use to climb higher. But I'm done with that. I'm done being something you own. You ungrateful." He sees me. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. "He actually sees me, and I won't give that up. Not for you. Not for anyone." She stared at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe I'd been a stranger to myself until Darren made me remember who I could be. "If you do this," she said coldly, "you'll have nothing. No dowry, no inheritance, no family. Then I'll have nothing." I met her eyes without flinching. "But I'll have him, and that's enough." She left without another word. I stood there in the silence, shaking, until I heard the door creak behind me. Darren. I didn't know how long he'd been there. Didn't know how much he'd heard. "I can leave," he said quietly. "If this is too much, if I'm costing you too much, I'll go." I spun around. "Don't you dare." He looked at me with those dark eyes, and I saw conflict there, pain. Like the idea of leaving was agony, but staying might destroy me. "I won't let you lose everything because of me," he said. "You're not making me lose anything." I crossed the room to him, my heart pounding. I'm choosing you even if it costs me everything." His jaw tightened. His hands clenched at his sides like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for me. "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do." I stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating off him. "I know exactly what I'm saying. I choose you, Darren. Not because I have to. Not because I'm desperate or foolish or any of the other things they're calling me. But because you make me feel like I matter. Like I'm worth something beyond what I can provide or who I belong to." Something flickered in his eyes. Something raw and hungry and barely controlled. "Say that again," he rasped. "I choose you." His hands came up to cup my face, trembling slightly, and I realized with a start that this strong, steady man was shaking because of me. "You have no idea what you do to me," he whispered. "Then show me." For a moment I thought he would. Thought he'd finally close that distance and kiss me the way I'd been dreaming about for weeks. But he didn't. Instead, he pressed his forehead to mine, breathing hard, exercising a restraint that must have been killing him. "Not yet," he murmured. "Not until you're mine in every way that matters." "What does that mean?" He pulled back just enough to look at me, and the intensity in his gaze made my knees weak. "Marry me." The handfasting ceremony was small, private, just us and the village elder who agreed to perform it under the light of the full moon. "Ancient tradition," he'd said, "older than the church, binding in ways that went deeper than law." We stood in the clearing at the edge of the forest, moonlight turning everything silver and surreal. The elder wrapped a cord around our joined hands, speaking words in a language I didn't fully understand but felt in my bones. Darren's hands were trembling. This strong, steady man who never seemed shaken by anything was trembling as the cord bound us together. "Do you take this woman as your mate?" the elder asked. "Not wife. Mate." "I do." His voice was rough, absolute. "And do you take this man as your mate?" I looked up at Darren, at the moonlight in his dark eyes, at the way he was looking at me like I was something precious and sacred and his. "I do." The elder tied the final knot and stepped back. "You are bound," he said simply. "In this life and whatever comes after." Darren's hands tightened around mine. His thumb brushed across my knuckles, that same gesture that had grounded me in the village square, that had steadied me through every moment of doubt. "Mine," he whispered. So quiet I almost didn't hear it, but I did. And instead of feeling trapped or owned, or any of the things I'd feared my whole life about marriage, I felt chosen. Not claimed, chosen. There's a difference. He lowered his head slowly, giving me time to pull away, Time to change my mind, time to run. I didn't. His lips met mine, soft and reverent and devastating, and I felt the world tilt beneath my feet, felt something fundamental shift in the universe, felt every wall I'd built around my heart crumble into dust. The kiss was gentle, almost chaste, but there was a promise in it. A hunger held carefully in check, a future waiting to unfold. When he pulled back, his eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them. "My wife," he murmured, testing the word. "My husband," I replied, and watched something fierce and possessive flash across his face. Married life was nothing like I'd expected. I'd grown up watching my parents' cold, transactional relationship. Had assumed all marriages were like that, duty and obligation and separate lives lived under the same roof. But with Darren, everything was different. We shared meals at the small table he'd built, laughed over burned bread and lumpy stew, talked late into the night about everything and nothing. He told me about the places he'd traveled before settling in our village. I told him about the books I'd read in secret, the dreams I'd hidden away because they weren't practical or proper. And slowly, carefully, we built something real. I noticed his possessive instincts early on, the way his hand would find the small of my back when we walked through the village, how he'd position himself between me and anyone who got too close, the protective edge that crept into his voice when men looked at me too long. It should have bothered me, should have felt suffocating. Instead, it made me feel safe, valued, like I was something worth protecting. One morning, I was in the garden when a traveling merchant stopped to ask directions. He was friendly, harmless, but he stood too close, his eyes lingering a moment too long. Darren appeared from nowhere, didn't say anything threatening, didn't even raise his voice, just moved to stand beside me, his presence a clear message. "She's mine." The merchant left quickly after that. "You didn't have to do that," I said, but I was smiling. "Yes, I did." He looked down at me with those dark eyes, and there was no apology in them. "I don't like other men looking at you like that." "Like what?" "Like they have a right to." Something warm unfurled in my chest. "And you do? Have a right to?" His hand came up to cut my jaw, thumb brushing across my cheekbone. "You're my wife. That gives me every right to make sure everyone knows it." I should have argued, should have asserted my independence or pushed back against the possessiveness, but I didn't want to, because the truth was, I loved it. Loved the way he claimed me without making me feel owned. Loved the way his protective instincts wrapped around me like a shield. I was falling, completely, irrevocably, terrifyingly in love. And I had no idea he was keeping secrets. I'd catch him sometimes, staring out the window at the forest with an expression I couldn't read. Something haunted, something wild. "What are you thinking about?" I'd ask. "Nothing important," he'd say, and pull me into his arms until I forgot the question. Or he'd disappear for hours at night, claiming he couldn't sleep and needed to walk. I'd wake alone in our bed, the sheets cold beside me, and wonder where he went. But I trusted him, believed him when he said it was nothing, because he was good to me, better than anyone had ever been. And whatever secrets he carried, I told myself they didn't matter. I was wrong about that. I was so terribly wrong. But for now, for these stolen weeks of happiness, I let myself believe the lie. I let myself fall in love with my husband. And he let me, knowing that when the truth finally came out, it would destroy everything. He knew, and he married me anyway. I found the collar 3 weeks into our marriage. It was an accident. I was putting away his clean clothes when it fell from the bottom of his pack, a thick band of worn leather and dull metal, etched with symbols I didn't recognize. Old symbols, the kind you see in ruins and forgotten places. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was warm, not from being tucked away in fabric, but warm like something alive, like it had a pulse. "What is this?" Darren's voice came from the doorway, tight and careful. "Put it down." I turned to face him, and the look on his face. I'd never seen him afraid before. "Why?" I held it up, something cold settling in my stomach. "What is it, Darren?" He crossed the room in 2 strides, reaching for the collar, but I stepped back. Tell me the truth. My voice shook. For once, just tell me the truth. His jaw clenched. You don't understand. Then make me understand. The words came out sharper than I intended. You disappear at night. You stare at the forest like it's calling you. You look at me sometimes like you're afraid I'll vanish. And now I find this. I shook the collar. And you won't even explain what it is. I was trying to protect you. From what? Silence stretched between us. Heavy. Suffocating. From me, he finally said. The words hit me like a physical blow. What are you talking about? He ran a hand through his hair, and I could see the war happening behind his eyes. The desperate calculation of how much to reveal, how much to keep hidden. I lied to you, he said quietly. About who I am. About what I am. My heart started pounding. I don't understand. I'm not just a worker, not just some poor man passing through. He looked at me with such raw anguish that I felt it in my chest. You're what? I whispered. He reached for the collar in my hands. This time, I let him take it. And then he did something I never could have anticipated. He fastened it around his own neck. This suppresses what I am, he said. It keeps me contained, human, safe. Safe from... He unbuckled it. The effect was immediate. Power exploded through the room like a shockwave. The air itself seemed to bend and shimmer. My knees buckled, and I hit the floor hard, not from being pushed, but from the sheer overwhelming presence that suddenly filled every inch of space. The temperature spiked. My skin prickled with awareness. Every instinct in my body screamed that I was in the presence of something dangerous, something primal, something other. And then I felt it, like a cord snapping into place between us, like something fundamental in the universe clicking into alignment. The bond. It hit me with the force of a lightning strike. Heat flooded through my veins, setting every nerve ending on fire. I gasped, clutching my chest as sensations I didn't have words for cascaded through me. Hunger, deep and all-consuming, like I'd been starving my entire life and only now realized it. Recognition, like my soul had been searching for something and had finally found it. Belonging, the bone-deep certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. What? I couldn't form words, couldn't think past the overwhelming connection thrumming between us. Darren dropped to his knees in front of me, not above me, not standing over me in dominance. With me, at my level. His eyes had changed. They were darker now, but there was something else in them too. Something that glowed faint gold in the dim light of our small house. I'm a werewolf, he said. And not just any werewolf. I'm the Alpha King. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. No, I breathed. Yes, you're lying. You have to be lying. I'm not. His voice was gentle but firm. Everything I told you about being a worker, about having nothing, it was all a lie. I came to this village in disguise because I needed... He swallowed hard. I needed to know if someone could want me without the crown, without the power, without all the things that make people kneel. I stared at him, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. You lied to me. My voice cracked. About everything. Not everything. He reached for my hand, and I let him take it even though I wanted to pull away, even though I felt betrayed and furious and heartbroken. How I feel about you, that was never a lie. The way I look at you, the way you make me feel, the reason I married you, all of that was real. But you didn't give me a choice. Tears burned behind my eyes. You didn't let me decide for myself if I could love a king or a werewolf or whatever you are. You made that choice for me. I know. His grip tightened on my hand. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I needed... His voice broke. Needed to know that you saw me. Just me. Not the Alpha King. Not the most powerful werewolf in the territory. Just Darren. The bond between us pulsed with his emotion. I could feel it now. Feel his regret and his fear and his desperate, aching love. It made me furious. Because how could I stay angry at him when I could literally feel how much this was tearing him apart? I don't know if I can forgive this, I said. I'm not asking for forgiveness. He leaned forward, his forehead nearly touching mine. I'm asking for a chance. A chance to prove that everything that mattered was real. That you are my mate, my queen, my everything, and that has nothing to do with whether I wear a crown. Mate? The word came out strangled. The bond you're feeling. That's what it means. You're my fated mate. The other half of my soul. The one I've been searching for my entire life. His hand came up to cut my face. I would give up the crown, the pack, all of it just to keep you. I could feel the truth of it through the bond. Could feel that he meant every word. But it didn't erase the betrayal. I need time, I whispered. Pain flashed across his face, but he nodded. Take all the time you need. He started to pull away, but I grabbed his wrist. Don't put the collar back on. He looked at me, confused. I want to feel you, I said, through this bond or whatever it is. I want to know when you're lying, when you're hiding. I want the truth, Darren, all of it. No more secrets. Something fierce and possessive blazed in his eyes. No more secrets, he promised. I was still trying to process everything. Still trying to reconcile the humble worker I'd married with the Alpha King kneeling before me when the howls started. They came from the forest. Multiple voices raised in a sound that made ice flood through my veins. Darren's head snapped up, his entire body going rigid. What is that? I asked, even though some primal part of me already knew. Rogues. He was on his feet in an instant, moving to the window. They found me. Found you. Why? Because I've been here too long. Because I didn't return when I was supposed to. Because the pack has been vulnerable without their alpha. He turned to me, and the look on his face was pure anguish. They're coming. Fear crashed over me. How many? Too many. More howls. Closer now. I could hear branches snapping in the forest. Heavy bodies moving fast. Darren crossed back to me in 3 strides. His hands cupped my face, and he kissed my forehead soft and desperate and devastating. Stay in the house, he commanded. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me. Darren, please, his voice cracked. Stay alive for me. That's all I'm asking, just stay alive. Through the bond, I felt everything. His fear not for himself, but for me. His rage at the rogues for threatening what was his overwhelming need to protect me at any cost. Come back to me, I whispered. Always. He stepped back, and I watched as his body began to change. I should have been terrified. Should have run or screamed or done something other than stand there transfixed. But I couldn't look away. His bones shifted with sounds that should have been sickening but somehow weren't. His form expanded, muscles rippling and reforming. Fur erupted across his skin dark as midnight, thick and powerful. And then he wasn't a man anymore. He was a wolf, massive and beautiful and absolutely terrifying. His eyes, those same dark eyes that had looked at me with such tenderness, now glowed gold with predatory focus. He was magnificent. He was a monster. He was mine. The wolf Darren turned and crashed through the door, racing toward the forest and the howls that were growing louder with every second. And through the bond I felt everything. Every surge of adrenaline as he ran. Every flash of rage as he scented the rogues. Every calculated assessment as he prepared to fight. But underneath it all, threaded through every heartbeat and every breath, was one overwhelming emotion. Love. He was fighting for me. He was willing to die for me. And God help me. I knew in that moment that despite the lies, despite the secrets, despite everything, I loved him too. I loved my husband. I loved the Alpha King. I loved the wolf racing into the forest to protect me, and I would do whatever it took to make sure he came back alive. I felt the first blow land through the bond. Pain exploded across my ribs, not mine, but his. I gasped, doubling over, one hand braced against the wall. Another hit, this one to his shoulder. I felt teeth sink in, felt the hot rush of blood, felt his fury spike as he retaliated. The bond was merciless. It showed me everything. Every slash of claws, every snap of jaws, every moment where death came close enough to taste. I couldn't stay in the house. couldn't just stand there while he fought for his life, for our lives. So I ran. Out the door, into the night, toward the sounds of snarling and violence that made every rational part of my brain scream at me to turn back. But I couldn't. The bond pulled me forward like a leash, and I followed it into the darkness. I found them in the clearing. 5 rogues, massive, scarred, wild-eyed creatures that moved with the chaotic violence of animals who'd forgotten what it meant to be part of a pack. And Darren. He was larger than all of them. More powerful. But they had numbers, and they fought dirty coordinating attacks, going for weak spots, trying to drag him down through sheer brutality. I watched him tear one rogue's throat out, watched another hit the ground and not get up, but there were still 3 left, and he was bleeding from a dozen wounds. Through the bond, I felt his exhaustion, his pain, his desperate determination to end this before they got past him, before they got to me. One of the rogues broke away from the fight, heading straight for me. Time slowed. I saw its yellow eyes lock onto mine, saw its lips pull back from blood-stained teeth, saw death coming for me in fur and fang. And then Darren was there. He hit the rogue mid-leap, taking it down with such savage force that I heard bones crack. They rolled across the ground in a tangle of limbs and fury, and when they separated, the rogue wasn't moving anymore. But it had cost him. Through the bond, I felt the weakness spreading through his body, felt the blood loss starting to take its toll, felt him struggling to stay on his feet as the remaining 2 rogues circled. And I realized with horrible clarity, he wasn't going to win this. Not alone. Something inside me snapped. I didn't think, didn't plan, just acted on pure instinct. I ran into the clearing, putting myself between Darren and the rogues. The wolves froze. Even the rogues seemed startled by the sheer stupidity of a human stepping into the middle of a shifter fight. Stop. My voice rang out across the clearing, and I felt something else come with it. Something that thrummed through the bond and radiated outward like a shockwave. Authority. The rogues whimpered. Actually whimpered. And then, impossibly, they lowered their heads. Behind me, I felt Darren shift back to human form. Felt his shock and pride and fear warring with each other. "You're not rogues," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You're wolves without a pack, without an alpha, and you're attacking the only one who could give you that." One of them snarled, but it was half-hearted, defensive. "He left his pack vulnerable," I continued. "I know. But he's here now, and if you kill him, you'll have nothing. No alpha, no structure, no chance at anything better than this." I gestured at their scarred, half-starved bodies. "Is this really what you want? To die alone and forgotten in the dirt?" Silence. Then, slowly, the larger of the 2 rogues lowered himself to the ground, submitted. The other followed. I felt Darren move up behind me, his hand finding my waist. His touch was warm and steady despite the wounds he'd sustained. "They're yours now," I said quietly, not turning around. "What happens to them?" "They come home." His voice was rough, exhausted, but certain. "Every wolf deserves a pack, even ones who've forgotten how to be part of one." The royal guard arrived at dawn. I'd been tending to Darren's wounds by candlelight, my hands shaking as I cleaned blood from cuts that were already starting to heal at an impossible rate. The knock on the door made us both freeze. "My king." The voice was formal, military. "We've come to escort you home." Darren looked at me, question in his eyes. I nodded, because there was no more hiding, no more pretending. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. He opened the door to reveal 20 wolves in human form, all wearing the same dark uniform, all dropping immediately to one knee at the sight of him. But their eyes weren't on Darren. They were on me. "My queen," the captain said, and I felt the ground shift beneath my feet all over again. The village woke to find the royal guard in their streets. I watched from Darren's side as people emerged from their houses, confusion giving way to shock, giving way to horror as they realized what was happening. My mother appeared on her doorstep, her face draining of color. The merchant's daughter, who'd laughed too loud at Darren's jokes, looked like she might faint. The baker, the cobbler, the elder who'd performed our hand-fasting ceremony, all of them, staring at the poor worker who was actually a king, and at me, the worthless daughter who was apparently a queen. The captain approached my mother with cold efficiency. "You are hereby summoned to the palace to answer for your treatment of the queen." "The queen?" My mother's voice came out strangled. "But she's nobody. She's nothing. She is the fated maid of the Alpha King," the captain cut her off, "which makes her the most powerful Luna in the territory. And you humiliated her, disowned her, cast her out with nothing." His voice dropped to something dangerous. "The king is displeased." I felt Darren's possessive satisfaction through the bond, felt his barely restrained fury at what my mother had done, but I didn't feel vindicated, didn't feel the rush of victory I'd expected. I just felt tired. "Let her go," I said quietly. Every head turned toward me. Darren's hand tightened on my waist. Through the bond, I felt his confusion, his desire to make them all pay for what they'd done to me. "She doesn't deserve mercy," he said, low enough that only I could hear. "I know." I looked up at him. "But I don't need her to suffer. I just need her to be gone." Something shifted in his expression, softened. "As my queen commands," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. My mother stared at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe the daughter she'd tried to break had finally died in that square, leaving someone stronger in her place. "You have one day to leave this village," I told her. "After that, you're no longer welcome in any territory under our rule." She opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time in my life, she had nothing to say. I turned away before she could find her voice, turned away from the village and the people and the entire life I'd lived before Darren. And I didn't look back. Well, that's not entirely true. I looked back once, just once, as we reached the edge of the village, the royal guard forming a protective circle around us. I looked at the small houses and the market square and the well where I'd carried water until my hands bled, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering attachment, just peace. "You never belonged there," Darren said softly, following my gaze. "No," I agreed. "I didn't." His hand found mine, fingers lacing together in that gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Ready to go home?" Home. The palace. A place I'd never seen, full of people I didn't know, in a world I didn't understand. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt his steady presence through the bond, felt his unwavering certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." The palace was overwhelming. Massive stone walls that stretched toward the sky. Halls wide enough to fit my entire house. Wolves everywhere, guards and servants and pack members all stopping to stare as we passed. And the whispers. Always the whispers. "That's her? The human? She doesn't look like a queen." What was he thinking? I felt Darren's fury spike through the bond with each comment. Felt him restraining himself from confronting every person who dared question me, but I didn't need him to fight these battles. A maid showed me to what would be my chambers. They were beautiful, luxurious, everything I'd never had growing up. And I'd never felt more out of place in my life. I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by silk and gold and luxury, and felt the weight of it all crash down on me. I don't belong here either. The thought came unbidden, unwanted, but undeniable. I wasn't raised for this, wasn't trained to be a queen or a Luna or whatever they expected me to be. I was just a merchant's daughter who'd married a man she thought was poor. How was I supposed to lead a pack, rule a territory, be worthy of a king? "I can feel you spiraling." Darren's voice came from the doorway. I turned to find him leaning against the frame, watching me with those dark eyes that saw too much. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted. He crossed the room to me. "Do what?" "Any of it. Be a queen. Be your mate. Be enough." His hands cupped my face, forcing me to meet his gaze. "You've always been enough. From the moment I saw you carrying water with bleeding hands, from the moment you refused to cry in that square, from the moment you chose me over everything else, His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. You were enough then. You're enough now. But they don't think so. I gestured vaguely at the door. The pack, the court, they look at me like I'm an imposter. They'll learn. His voice dropped to something dangerous, something possessive. They will respect you or answer to me. That's not the point. Then what is? I need to choose myself, I said. Not because you demand it, not because the bond says so, but because I believe I'm worthy. And right now, my voice cracked. Right now, I'm not sure I do. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he kissed my forehead, my cheeks, the corner of my mouth. Then I'll believe it for both of us, he murmured against my skin. Until you remember what I've known all along, that you're not just enough, you're everything. The coronation was 3 days later. I stood in front of the entire pack, wearing a crown that felt too heavy and a dress that felt too fine, and recited words I'd memorized but didn't quite believe. The pack knelt, every single one of them, even the ones who'd whispered, even the ones who doubted. They knelt because their alpha commanded it. But as I looked out over the sea of bowed heads, I realized something. I didn't need them to kneel. I needed them to see me the way Darren did. The way I was finally starting to see myself, not as a merchant's daughter who got lucky, not as a human who stumbled into a bond, but as someone who'd survived humiliation and betrayal and violence and come out stronger, someone who'd stood between an alpha king and rogues because it was the right thing to do, someone who'd chosen love over comfort, truth over safety, herself over everyone else's expectations. When the ceremony ended, Darren led me away from the crowd, away from the celebration and the pack, and all the people who wanted a piece of their new queen. He took me to a private garden, hidden behind the palace walls, where moonlight turned everything silver. No crowns here, he said, removing mine gently, then his own. Just us. I looked at him, this man who'd lied to me and protected me and loved me despite every reason not to, and felt the bond between us pulse with warmth. I forgive you, I said quietly, for the lies, for the secrets, all of it. Relief crashed through him so powerfully I felt it in my own chest. Thank you, he breathed, but if you ever lie to me again, I won't. He pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine. Never again, I swear it. We stood there in the moonlight, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds, two souls who'd chosen each other when the world said they shouldn't. And I realized something fundamental. I was never worthless. I was just waiting for the world to catch up, waiting for someone to see me, really see me. And now that I'd found him, now that I'd found myself, nothing would ever make me doubt my worth again. I was the merchant's daughter who became a queen, the human who claimed an alpha king, the woman who'd been broken and rebuilt herself stronger. And I was exactly where I was meant to be. Finally. Completely. Home. Thank you for listening to another emotional, magical shifter romance here on Tina Romance Library. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, so you never miss more powerful, heart-gripping romance stories.